Welcome back. We're ready to move on to our next presentation, Tripolarity, by a Palestinian flautist, music therapist, and composer, Faris Ishaq. Faris Ishaq is known for his mastery of the ney, an ancient flute with a simple design. Faris is on a mission to unlock its maximum potential, he really is. His contemporary performance approach evolved from a wide range of vocabulary and techniques. Concept he developed by playing jazz and Indian classical music. His sound comes from a deep understanding of multiphonic, sound effect, and percussive playing, all of which he blends with composition influenced by Arabic, jazz, and world music. Ishaq will release his album Tripolarity this summer. The advisor for Faris during this semester was Alan Chase, and we are very glad to welcome in the committee Julia Museilan and Jerry Dick. Please, a big applause for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you very much, Marco. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to my presentation. Today, I'm going to talk about a concept that represents me. It's called tripolarity. This is basically represent three aspects. One is music therapy, which is my background, and second is poetry, and third is my main instrument, the Arabic flute. I've decided for this project to combine them in one album that represents 6 songs and actually a research paper. But tripolarity means, for me, a third neutral pole, which is not associated to any extreme traditional thinking. It's a place of non-judgment, and I believe it's a great starting point for people to redefine their experiences, especially if they were labeled by stigmas that could limit their possibilities. That said, I applied this to my own thinking of music therapy, ney, and poetry, and was able to find hidden potential in them. For music therapy, the stigma is mental illness, especially psychosis. It's a state of being in which a person experiences a different reality from what is considered normal. In psychiatric term, it's associated with bipolar and schizophrenia, which is pathological. But to my mind, I believe they just have a different way of communication and they're not pathological. So I found some interesting arguments. First, Dr. Robinson, while many psychiatrists can diagnose disturbance of mental health and categorize them into different classes, few, if any, can diagnose sanity. Second, anthropologist Dr. Joseph Polomny found an interesting thing. There's a connection between people with schizophrenia and prehistoric tribal shamans. So that could mean basically that in some cultures, especially in Western cultures, they are nurtured towards feeling they are mentally ill, and in other cultures, they are nurtured toward feeling as leaders and spiritual leaders. So that's a big contradictive thing. Third, there's a huge connection between the language of psychotic people to poetry, which I'm going to also explain later. So transitioning from music therapy to performance, this project developed for me into a sense of questioning about the reality that we're living in. So if people can experience altered state of consciousness, then it doesn't mean that the common shared one is the truth. So I've written original compositions and poems expressing the search for neutrality by contrast of illusion and reality, for example, dark, light, madness, and sanity. Cool. Now moving to the second side, which is my ancient flute. This is the ney for who doesn't know how it does sound like. Just a small blink. Yeah. It's basically one of the oldest flutes that still exists. So it's diatonic, has access to microtones, but not the full chromatic series. So a solution was to use the latest invention by instrument maker Yasser al-Shafi'i, which provides more chromatic access. But still, a player has to use special bending techniques and half-holing to access actually 4 adjacent missing notes on the lower octave. That's why sometimes on a concert key flute, it's hard to play B minor, A minor, A flat minor, because the root is missing. Yeah. It was important for me for this project to remove the nay from the stigma which is associated with a pure melancholic sound. We actually have techniques that make the instrument melancholic. And instead, I wanted to go back to the myth of the Sufi tradition, in which one discovers his own sound as part of the self-exploration process. And this will help me to go further into more extended techniques, interconnectivity with other flute cultures, and music, especially jazz. I was thankfully given the place in Global Jazz Institute to experiment, study, and play the nay within a jazz context. I was deeply inspired by John Coltrane, especially his search for sound and spirituality, which connects to the Sufi tradition I just mentioned before. And thankfully, I was pushed by Edmar Cologne to transcribe the full Bye Blackbird solo, which you can see online. And here's a part of it. Yeah. And to continue with that, I was lucky to study 1 semester with George Carzoni. Especially the triadic chromatic approach gave me no excuse not to play every chromatic note on 1 flute. So, and it added a lot of value to my improvisation. I even feel it's connected to the Arabic way of improvisation, but more randomly. So I'm going to speak a little bit about modal Arabic music and modal jazz. Oops, it wants to play. Our modal music comes from its lyrical improvisation, which is based on a constant feeling of the root. And we play around the different tetrachords that's associated with the scale, which we call maqam. Instead, I feel in modal jazz improvisation, I always search for the root. And for me, it's sometimes hidden. And I learned to start to hide the root of modal Arabic improvisation. And especially I did this homework for Daniela of finding 7th chord, which eventually gave me a map for composition and for improvisation. For example, Athar chord maqam, which is a dark maqam. There's a D flat major sus4 inside it. Can start mixing those 2 for different feelings. Cool. Also for this project, I used traditional, untraditional, and extended techniques to change the sound of the nay. For example, I really wanted a dark, elusive sound in the project, so I worked to develop 2 techniques which are round tonguing and pitched wind sound. Second, I worked on multiphonics. Silver flute players, they use alternative fingers to make the flute split the sound. I found some on the nay. Here's the note. Also, since 2 years, I was developing to work on that without needing to play the alternative fingers. That's by overblowing and holding the harmonic series notes together. Sounds like this. I'm going to build it gradually. Thank you. In the composition, you hear a lot of singing and playing and percussive tonguing. Okay, last part, poetry. Since there's a connection between psychosis, metaphorical language, and poetry, I wanted to convert the natural meter of Arabic poetry into music because I want the music to feel as it's coming from the natural spoken language, as to emphasize how important it is to accept each other's communication as it is, despite if it makes sense or doesn't make sense. Okay, this is influenced by music therapy techniques, Daniel Pere's lab workshop about rhythm and language, John Corton, A Love Supreme, private lessons with Jerry Leake on South Indian rhythmical concepts. Interesting-wise, Arabic poetry has a very sophisticated poetry system, which has inside it rhythmical patterns that consist of short beats and long beats. And by this combination, you come to different musical cycles. For example, you have a symmetrical poetry cycle that goes to a symmetrical music cycle. تك 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 أرق على أرق ومثلي يأرق وجوان يزيد عبرة تترقرق جهد الصبابة أن تكون كما أرى عين مسهدة وقلب يخفق. That was the full cycle. Now, asymmetrical poetry cycle. هروب نفس أم ختام كل ما يبتلي الدرب أوهام كنا في الظلام والشمس بنا الغرب إن ضاع سهم بالهوى والحق لا به الثق كرها عرفنا أعداءنا والنفس هي الحرب والله هي الحرب والله هي الحرب كرها هي الحرب والله 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 هي الحرب. Thank you. Special thanks for the wonderful team. Now I'm going to play the music. I left behind some thoughts to accompany you. And sorry, I had to edit some of the songs for time issues. داء الجرح بالصمت لا بالاشتعال نار القمم تشتد عن جوف الجبال وإذ شكوت لله بؤس الجحيم اعتاب الله عن غير سؤال. Thank you. This one was the asymmetrical poetry cycle I played before, but in trio version. Thank you. This is the last part. And this is Resolution by John Coltrane, combined with a poetry meter. Cool.
Faris Ishaq.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Faris. I'm going to pass the microphone immediately to Julia.
All right. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's really well organized, and it really summarizes a great deal of work that you've put into it. You know, from the transcribing John Coltrane on the ney to, I think that's pretty unique. I actually had a question. Two different questions. Can I do that? Yeah. Okay, great. I was wondering if you can talk about the poetry to the Mad Lullaby, because that's all your original poetry, right?
Yeah.
What is the kind of the subject that you're basing it on, and does that one have, I guess, a meter structure?
Yeah, actually, it's the melody is the meter in this one. So it's like bam ba ra ra di da do ba di da bam داء الجرح بالصمت لا بالاشتعال نار القمم تشتد. So it's like a lullaby melody poetry meter, but the meaning is very contradictive in this one, so pretty hard to explain, but it's basically talks about the children born free of judgment. How far can we avoid feeding them facts that don't belong to the definite truth? Yeah.
Great. Can I have one more question? I have a few questions. For In Surrender,
Yeah.
it was very interesting in the description. You said, go through the equal divisions of the octave.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the
Sure.
modes that you were
Sure.
thinking of.
Yeah. So basically, this was inspired by John Coltrane. Like when I first started reading the Giant Steps, what it's about. So I thought maybe I'll try to use it in a modal improvisation instead of playing it really fast. So I based that on like from E flat to going to G major 7th to B minor 9th. Basically, it's a kind of Phrygian mode, mixed Phrygian modes playing around different tetrachords, but still also try to apply different things that I learned here in global jazz. In those, yeah. Mm-hmm. And for me, it feels actually going through a journey, because whenever I jump from E flat to G major 7th, I feel I'm developing something. Then I go to B minor, a little bit more sad for me. Then I drop down to the aggressive E flat minor. That's like how I feel it. Then I go back to the middle, which is G major sharp 11th. It's more of a neutral place for me. Then again sad. And then I finally settle down on the last note. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. There's so much interplay between light and dark.
Yeah.
In there, like in light and dark sounds. Great. I think I'm all set.
Thank you, Julia.
Shanna?
Great, just fantastic. I was just amazed by the colors, just amazing, totally amazing.
Thank you.
One, I think you included really great musical examples too. Really, you put that together really, really well. Make sure you volume test before you do your presentation. If you hadn't been sitting here, it would have been a little soft, right?
Yeah.
So those are the only comments I had at all were about the presentation itself, because everything else I have nothing to say about the musical thing other than it's brilliant and beautiful.
Thank you.
Just amazing. I guess one thing I could say would be you have to assume, just like when you're writing a paper or something, that the listener knows, your audience knows absolutely nothing about what you're thinking in your head. And so just defining in one sentence what your project was at the very outset, just what is it? It's a composition, right? It's got a musical, like if you ever give this to a non-musical audience, they won't even, know what you're doing until halfway through.
Yeah.
And so, and then I thought you really, really needed a very clear conclusion, because we kind of just ended at the end of one of your pieces. So I know that's kind of giving you negative feedback, but again, only because there's nothing else to say. It's overall, it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
It's amazing work. It really is.
Thank you.
Actually, it would
come
be
to
great.
this.
Yes. Why don't you talk about
Sure.
your plans for the future?
Yeah, I will. So basically, the second project, I would love to have it more interactive with people who are suffering from the stigma of psychosis, and writing poems together and making them actually compose the music. That's one side for music therapy. And now for the Ney, I would love to write a contemporary Ney book that explain all these techniques and how to actually compose for a Ney, because I believe that people have no clue about how to write for it. They don't even know what's the missing notes, that it can do also play some classical flute parts, classical silver flute parts. So it might be interesting for composers to know all of that. And third, I'm still interested and fascinated by the Arabic poetry. And I want to see if there is connection between these poetry meters and to the traditional Arabic rhythms that has developed all over these years. Yeah.
Wonderful. Jerry.
Faris, very beautiful, amazing, hard work. Have quite a connection from my class and also the private lessons. And I have some extensive comments on the music that I've collected that I'll email, so you have those as part of your package.
Thank you.
We go way back already. It feels
Yeah.
like quite a history. But just on the music, as I was listening and taking notes, just the voice and the ney, the purity of those sounds, that kind of legato lyrical quality, really beautiful. Of course, Jaira, amazing singer, and so an immediate connection there that's so profound.
Yep.
And as that's layering above the more syncopated rhythmic bass and rhythm section, you have both qualities really blending quite nicely.
Thank you.
There's so many, many beautiful possibilities, and you've really reached them quite a lot. The great use of changing the speed of the melody in the first piece. You slowed it down to half speed as a
Yep.
kind of an undercurrent
And
during the improvisation.
Yep.
So I don't know if that connects to some of our work in
of
changing
course.
speeds.
And
but,
there's inside the double speed of it. I couldn't
Yeah.
show due to my time.
So that is a fantastic quality that I think we should all be taking advantage of, shifting speeds and letting that create a whole new world. And even though the tune in 14/8 was very complex in its nature, it had a very danceable quality to it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to try to think about what it is. My academic mind kind of wants to sneak in and figure out metrically what's happening. And as I listened to all your music, I let the first listening just happen and just be taken on a journey, enjoy the drama, enjoy the evolution of the music and the influences that I also recognized. And you're bridging the tradition of your music with more contemporary approaches, which I envy that, because I'm an outsider from most of the traditions that I've studied, the African and the Indian, and of course I have some strong jazz background. But and you have always been born in the blood of that music, so it's very natural and organic. So I think the program has benefited you greatly because of all the bridging of these connections, and you have a lifetime of resources, obviously, to draw from. So I commend you for that on the path as you continue and progress in your career, and hopefully you'll keep in touch with all of us about those musical transformations. I'm wondering if there's a way for the poetry. I know that the language is creating the meter, so it's not like you can translate it to English and suddenly have any connection there. It would totally ruin it, and it would, obviously. But is there, in African songs, they use really short proverbs to summarize what the essence of the story is in the songs. And I'm wondering if in English or some other way to, even if it's a whisper, to bring out 3 or 4 words that sort of summarize a stanza or an idea that would allow us. Obviously, you'll have maybe translations in the liner notes, but who reads liner notes when they listen to music full time? So any way to kind of bridge that gap for us to sort of, you've said a whole statement, and I'm sure the story has evolved, but is there a 3 or 4 word way of presenting that in some kind of recognizable form? And I know English is obviously the one I'm referring to, but another bridge, perhaps, in the poetry side. I'm sorry, you answer.
Yeah, sure. Meaning-wise, it's basically this. It's going through circles.
Yes.
And finding the potential in a place where you feel like you are equal to a zero number, and in this zero you can actually start adding values to it. That's meaning-wise, and Um, Rhythmical wise, I tried. I have some projects that's like with English,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
for me, it doesn't give me this kind of fixed short beats and long beats.
Of course.
Which I was fascinated by that in classical Arabic poetry and not in the normal language, because the way I speak Arabic doesn't have the short beat and long beat. So I was fascinated with old Arabic that is very strict actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's fascinating. Do you have several names in different keys, or
Yep.
should I wind up? I'm sorry. So you said you can play chromatically on an instrument, but
Yeah.
does that mean you could theoretically play any tune on that one instrument, or do you need to switch? Like on
it's-
tabla,
yeah.
I have to switch drums, or Bansuri players have different flutes.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Great, yeah, I'll answer that quickly. Yes, I have first different flute for each key. I can play different scale, like each scale on one flute now.
Yeah.
But preferably for Arabic music, because of intonation and microtones, I would use different flutes. But for jazz, maybe I could play in one flute. But sometimes these hidden notes, which I explained later, are very hard to access, especially if the root is missing.
Right.
So that
right.
would be, yeah.
Fascinating.
I think
You must be doing a lot of processing of how that works before you even get to making the notes. I mean, I couldn't even imagine.
No, and
that.
especially in global jazz, when I was like here, there was no time to think which flute is better. So I had to play everything with the
Right, right.
concert key. Yeah.
Wow. And back to the whole poetry thing, if I could, you could maybe weave in some of these South Indian syllables as a connector to the actual long short. you know?
Definitely.
So there could be some kind of parallel motion with
Definitely,
that.
yeah.
I mean, I could go on about your connection to the musical therapy and how beautiful and vital that is, but I'll let my other general comments that I'll email to you.
I appreciate
to,
it, yeah.
to cover that. So
Thank you.
But I'll hand it off. I've covered enough time. So
Thank you.
Who should be next?
Julia has another question.
I guess it's more of a comment, just a general comment for everyone. I think I maybe didn't state enough how much of a amazing contribution you're making with just, opening up the possibilities on the ney, because there is that stigma that you mentioned, for even for myself as a silver flute player, I feel like, oh, okay, my instrument is adapted to all of these extra techniques, but then seeing you and hearing you apply all of that, and also, modify your instrument to really make it a chromatic instrument, to open up just the amount of colors that you can get out from it. I don't know if we have maybe a minute for you to just demonstrate a couple of more techniques that you're using, just so we can hear it a little bit more.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. So maybe a combination of Arabic rhythmic tonguing, which is called tashbib, and slap tonguing, untraditional. So that's a simple melody. Becomes like this. Slap tonguing. Yeah.
There are moments when it actually sounds like a silver flute. You reach that really pure, beautiful, elegant sound, and
Thank you.
we know that the ney has all the other darker, richer qualities as
Thank
well.
you.
But you found light and dark on the instrument. Absolutely.
Yeah, so following up what Julia was saying about, this tapping into, very creative contribution for your instrument, but I think that you're also doing something very special for music therapy community. It seems like to me, your approach is coming from a very different point of view. So my question to you is, do you plan to present this to the medical community? And if you do, what would be your approach to that?
Yeah, definitely way more research on that subject, because in a medical community they need really approved research, and this is a performance master, and artistic more, I can speak more artistically, but I always had problem with issues like mental health and stigmas that psychiatry provide for people, and for me working as a music therapy within a psychiatry is very hard, because I always feel that the people I'm working with are constantly looking in a different eye on these people who are in the psychiatry. So that was why a huge reason why I want to shift music therapy to performance. Yeah.
Hey, quick, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Not a question, a couple comments. First of all, as someone from a different country myself, as many of us are here, I'm very well aware of the stigma that comes with stereotypes, and we all have different stereotypes. And I feel like your presentation today went an incredible way towards presenting a side of your culture and personalities and history that very seldom gets represented. And so I think that's very important. And the other thing that I want to say is that when you first came to me for the private lessons, I think the first lesson I went in a direction and we kind of missed each other. And then you came back and I started listening for something else because I realized that where I wanted to go with it, or what I thought I needed to go with it, was not where you wanted to go. And you made your sense of leadership actually very clear. Okay. And I really appreciate that, because as a teacher, there is no stronger way to actually grow than to have students who present something that is so clear and so obviously focused. And you were able to gear the lessons in the direction that hopefully benefited you the most. And I just want to say also TED Talk. I mean, there's a clear TED Talk in there. If you no, seriously. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say, a lot of there's been a lot of great comments, but one of the things I want to acknowledge is some of the redefining elements that you're doing as far as emotions. When I hear your music, I realize that I'm looking forward to beauty in the world. You are redefining concepts that we're familiar with as romantic melodies, as romantic events, as lyrical things, and that is really powerful what you brought to the table and you are bringing to the table. Your level of artistry is very inspiring, very humbling to me.
Thank you.
And this is an amazing work that I was thinking about a TED Talk too. I was thinking about Berklee faculty too. No, I think that's it. But I was thinking, like, man, I feel you're the prime example of what mentorship means, which is, it's like if you take your son to a parade, children, and then you have to tell them, because he doesn't reach, he can't see the height. So what's coming there? What's coming? And then all of a sudden you take this person and put him on your shoulder, and now the father takes the child, and then now the child is telling the father what's happening. And that's what you're doing to us. You're telling us, you're describing the beauty that we must be looking forward and excited to be looking forward to in the world. Couple things that I think needs to be addressed. I think you need to work in, when I hear the flute live, I hear a lot more subtleties that I miss on the recordings.
Yeah.
And I think you gotta really work on the techniques of like commit with a sound engineer to really redefine the way the miking and all of that goes for that. That's one thing. Also, the sound of the recording felt a little bit tampered. The drum way in the back. I mean, that another suggestion would be, in terms of what he was saying, maybe not to use the words. So I understand the concept that you're going for, trying to keep it in the poetry of your own language, but maybe I can picture something called, based on Ornette Coleman, The Shape of Jazz to Come, something that would say the shape of global jazz to come. and what you're doing, man, it's so inspired, and my gratitude, because this year class was truly a humbling experience for all of us as a mentor and teacher. So thank you for all this amazing work, a lot to think for us.
Thank you.
Faris Ishaq,
Thank
beautiful.
You. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. There's lunch, and we will be back at 1:10. Thank you.